Good morning, evening, wherever you are, or, past, present, future. Good to see you. I am Cryptameria. I am located out of Victoria, BC, Canada, and I do artwork, politics. I have a little blog, and I have exciting news. I know I didn't stream for a bit, but it's so much work doing all this animation, but I'm so excited about this. Like, I'm going to pull up the first one again, just because get out of there. Okay, come on. No. Over here. There we go. This one turned out so good, except I wish I did more frames for it to make her really come out. And I like the hummingbirds. They all fly. I didn't pull up that blog yesterday. I'm going to go through today's vlog and then go through yesterday's. They look like they're flying. I'm so proud of myself. It's so much work and so much data and so much time, but I'm still not happy with the music, but I'm playing with different concepts because I want to develop these for advertising for local companies. Because I don't see a lot of other people doing something like this. So I think for local advertisers or local businesses, or someone wants something for, a wedding, or a bachelorette party. I could do the before and the after. Hopefully it doesn't wind up like The Hangover, but, And I can take, AI is just such a divisive art form right now because it goes into so many bigger topics with autonomy, our laws. But I'm excited about it. I always dreamed I'm going to watch that one more time because I always dreamed I could do something like this and to get the hummingbirds to fly just out of old school style animation. I love Geo. I think I posted him, I shared him on Twitter, but this is when I started out in this, we didn't have computers. You maybe had one on dial-up if you were rich and lucky, you can almost hear that sound in your head. It's yes, we're connecting to the Matrix. The glowing green screens from the 80s. Oh. Okay. Just a clip that came up. I'm gonna play this one more time. To turn my artwork into real. It's and I love how the hummingbird's coming up here, so I love them. I can't wait to see how far I can get in 6 months. I am so excited about this. I just never realized the potential of my artwork. And well, I'm enjoying the time while I can, because pretty soon I will. Yeah, this one was cool, but I'm gonna play with this one. Like, this is just kind of the rough copies of it. It's not. And I know I've played these ones before, but I figured out a way to speed up the footage, because if you speed it up, but then you need even more and more photos. Like, the amount of data I'm going through to do this is insane. But, and I'm going to do some like different themes, like very neutral, commercial friendly themes, like kids playing soccer, a hardware store, a grocery store, just really, but like that one took me like 9 hours for just this little clip. It's insane, but it looks so cool. And if I can take my art and make it into this, I can take other people's art and make it into this, or do like that photo series, give people that like nice airbrush. Like, I'm going to actually take some of my photos and do a series just to, as an experiment, to show people, yes, like, here is the potential for this. I know AI art is sort of scary, but this is what I dreamed of all my life, like, to be able to do this. Like, okay. I'll show you something. This was from FIFA, the under 17 in Victoria. And just to show the other picture to get the scale of this bad boy. Yeah, I helped sew this. And this was actually back in the day when you actually had real photos. You actually had to go to a photo shop, have a camera, buy film. So I have some I developed myself. That was smelly and painful. If anyone's done photography, I'm sure you're like, yes, hallelujah, there is a God. I don't have to deal with all those chemicals anymore. And it is still I still appreciate the art form. So this was like the opening banner and all of these panels. I'm sure if you've seen sporting events, you see people come out. And so all of these little strips were carried, but to sew something on that scale and also keep it like cohesive for all of these little panels, because people would come up from different areas of the stadium with the panels and put them together. I think I just blocked it out of my mind. But that was huge to sew. But working on a project like that, and you can tell how old it was, because it's actually like, I need to take all my old photos. I found my old portfolio of photos, what I have left. I have whole gaps and everything just moving so much. I'm like a gypsy. So I'm going to pull up another one. I'm just going to scroll down because I really I liked how the artwork turned out with this one. And I think if I can kind of start combining a lot of these together, it's going to be amazing. Like, it's just so much work. Like, I have so many like cyberpunk ones, like the really bright ones, but it's like how to layer them so it looks fluid. And that's one of the biggest tricks with animation I've been finding, like just. And then sometimes I'll go through, I will spend like an hour or two and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. And everything's like backwards, or the program doesn't put the photos in the order I wanted. And then it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. I guess we're gonna have to try this one again. So I'm gonna pull up my blog. I love how this is turning out. Like, I never imagined in my life I could take my artwork. Like, I dreamed about it as a kid in the 80s. Like, you dreamed about like just being, and even like cell phones. Cell phones were like the size of a phone book. Like, just not exaggerate. Well, maybe like a brick. Like, look at Motorola, and those puppies were like, So, and to do this level of animation, you actually had to take photos, develop photos, rephotograph photos, put them in order. So to do like a clip like this in the 1980s probably would have taken me like a month, a month or two. Like, because he would have also had to basically sort of hand draw everything or airbrush. And airbrushing is very fast and effective for artwork, but you can't, even with that, you can't get that clarity I'm getting out of this. And also it's like messy, and that compressor will piss off your neighbors. Yeah. Like, airbrushing is unless you have a really quiet compressor, it's not like an apartment type hobby. Just telling you that. So I'm going to pull up my blog. Let's just stop that. And because I found some, if you're not familiar with my blog or my channel, it's like a mix of artwork, and I do have clips on politics. I get into that. I'm like kind of the queen of copyright strikes. Like, it's like every day I'm like, yeah, I know YouTube. I'm a bad girl. Oh, just spank me once, please. They know I'd enjoy it too much. I actually get spanked quite a bit from them. Yeah. But that's what happens. And with C18 coming up January 26th, we are in for big trouble in Canada. I am really hoping this goes away, but I don't think it will. until Trudeau goes away, we're stuck. We're fucked. Basically fucked. Like, I really wish I could explain it to people. And I think everyone who was trying to get fire alerts from Facebook sort of understands, like, something's going on. And I've been trying to tell you guys for a few years this is going to be bad. And so January 26th is the deadline for C18, which means that news media in Canada is going to be heavily government controlled. And it is a law, hopefully, that can not even get the royal ascension, because that's how Canadian laws are. Like, they go through all these levels of government, and then there's this final one. So January 26th, we may or may not be in full communism. I don't know. It's so amusing. I love Canada. Do I? I think I do. I try to. I don't know anything else. Like, this is our home. Like, my home, my family's home. My family's like half Indigenous, and the other half is like immigrants from all over the world. So we are Canada, and we're losing it. We're losing it in ways that most people don't even realize. And so I also wanted to give a trigger warning. This is, getting into the political part. Yeah, all the artwork's cute and the music. Yeah, and the sucky music. Yeah. But some of the clips I found might be a little offensive. I don't care. I think some of us need to start standing up and saying it. And a lot of people can't. If you have kids and a job and business, and it's such a risk for even saying some things on social media, because you're gonna get labeled or get backlash, and I just don't give a fuck. So, let's just go with this. Sorry, I can't believe how long I slept. Like, my friend literally dropped me off from the orientation, and I realized what my work contract was going to be like for the next 3 to 5 months. And I curled up in my bed and just slept because I didn't want to deal with anything. I was like, oh my God, like, how am I going to do 9 hours for winter if I'm commuting? So they do have spots, and I'm going to just talk to the Legion, see if any of these old ladies have an extra couch or a room or something. I'll give them money. I'm not going to squat. It's just so much commuting from Sydney to Victoria. I think today it's like realizing, doing all the math on the numbers and everything. I was just like, I don't even want to I'm having a grumpy cat moment. So I'm going to pull up my blog. Let's just stick to that. Okay. And I had to bump it up a little. Hopefully that works. Yeah. Like, I'll pull up the original artwork soon. But for her to come up, like, to make, yeah, she does sort of look like me. It's like, I am trying. I'm vain as fuck. I don't care. Okay, this was an amazing ex Twitter, talk. I don't know if I'll pull that up at the end, and I needed a power cord. Famous. It wouldn't be my stream if I wasn't looking for a power cord. So this was the original artwork. This was the original artwork I used for the prompts. And with AI, you can do like a line drawing, or like I did with here, a collage. And I did this back in high school, like I was fascinated with surrealism and all these older art movements. They seemed so exciting, and now it's like I don't even know what's going on with it's especially with people gluing themselves to things. Like, wow, is someone gonna glue themselves to this in 100 years? Because I'm gonna be worth more when I'm dead. Sorry to put it like that, but that's the beauty of art. Death. Bad jokes. I think I actually got too much sleep. Yeah, I was dusting yesterday, and this is so dumb. This is like the ultimate dumb blonde thing to do. I have this like little jar, and I keep incense sticks in it, and I bent down and to dust, and I poked myself in the eye, and it hurt so much. That's why I didn't stream yesterday. I literally was like, okay, you're gonna be okay. You don't need to go to the hospital. Just like tuck your eye in, keep it closed. And then I curled up on the bed. And then later I was still like, I can't stream like this. Because if you have an eye injury, one of the best things you can do is just try and keep it shut. Yeah, I've had a few eye injuries. Okay. This is not a funny story, but I'm going to tell it. In high school, people would flick pennies. Let's see if I can even do it. Okay, obviously I'm out of practice, but you can actually get them really good. And one day in high school, one of my friends literally flicked one at me, and it hit me in the eye so hard that my eye turned green, and it was yeah, that's blood going in there. I was like, okay, thank you. You guys are assholes. God, it's a good thing we didn't have firearms. We just had knives and pennies. Oh God. And a few people had pipe bombs, but that's a whole other story. It wasn't anything. They were training for the army. Don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's so long away, plausible deniability and statute of limitations when I said that. Yeah, I had weird friends in high school. And thinking back, I'm but I almost think it was more we didn't have the internet. We would go out, play in nature. And yeah, you kind of want a knife in bear country or cougar country, especially because they stalking around schools. So you get for our American friends, like the mountain lions really like elementary schools and any kind of schools, like easy pickings. Like, yeah, like it's like every other week here. There's like Kitty in the bush, and that, people wonder why I don't go to church more. Well, it's on the way, and I, already got roll for my wallet. I don't want to get like eaten by a big critter. Yeah, Victoria's fun. I love it. Not really. Sort of. Let's see what else. Oh, that's not a happy one. Yeah, see, copyright. Yeah, maybe that's why nothing's working. I'm going to try and reload this. Come on. Are you working? There we go. Now we're cooking with gasoline and napalm. Oh, this is a good one. I found this one, and
howdy, YouTube. Welcome back to another
episode of
Truck Talk, brought to you by me, inspired by Chili. I'm going to tell y'all a little story. Just about 2 days ago, I was driving down the road here in my own little hometown of Rome, Georgia, man. Driving down the road, and I see this middle-aged man walking up the sidewalk all by himself, man. It's about 100 degrees with 100% humidity, and this old middle-aged man's walking up the sidewalk all by himself, and, buddy, he's got his mask on. And I thought, that's odd. I ain't seen that in a while. What's going on? So I started paying attention, looking around at people in the, driving in the cars and this and that, and I saw a few more people with their masks on, right? I got thinking, oh, heck, man, what's going on? I ain't seen this in a little while. So I got to doing a little bit of research, a little bit of listening, and looks like the powers that be are dropping down some information on some new coronavirus variants that are coming out here, right? And they're trying to get people all shook up again, and it looks like there's going to be potentially some more lockdowns coming, son. Some more lockdowns are probably coming. Now, why are we talking about this, man? Well, here's the first reason. There might be some more attempts at locking you down. Remember all that? Stay at home, shut your business down. Don't go outside. Don't do nothing. Wash your hands incessantly. Be completely freaking insane. Smother yourself with 2 masks and wear a biohazard suit. Y'all remember all that crap? Well, when that stuff rolls back around, here's the thing, man. You need to be thinking about that right now. And you need to go ahead and decide what your reaction is going to be. You need to go ahead and decide what you're going to do when this crap happens again. You need to make a decision, and when it happens again, you need to stand firm in that decision. All right? Now, I personally like to think it's going to be different when it comes around this time. I like to personally think people are going to react differently. I like to personally think that a lot of people hopefully learned a few things over the last few years, but I don't know that for sure is going to be the case as I see this middle-aged man walking down the road.
I know,
here, rural Georgia with a mask on. I hate to see what's happening in the cities right now. I hate to see that.
You don't want to know.
Y'all remember also when it happened last time that people like me and most of you guys listen to this, we were the people that were shamed and yelled at and told on, and we were the people that were ostracized because we wouldn't wear our masks and we wouldn't close our businesses, and we actually went about our lives and accepted the risk that is being a live human being. You might get sick, you might die, That's part of it. I'm going to keep on living, man. Remember? Well, I look at these people now that are going back to wearing these freaking masks and crap, man. And if you're doing that now, that tells me something about you. If you're going to put a mask on now, like I got some grace for the folks last time. There were a lot of folks that were freaked out, ain't never heard or seen of nothing like this in their life. I got some grace for those folks, man. But I got no grace for you if you're going to go that route again. I got no grace for somebody that's gonna wear their face covering. I got no grace for them. It don't mean that I hate them. It don't mean that I'm gonna do to them what they did to me and be mean to them like they were mean to us. But I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, I don't know that there's any hope for them people. I believe the people that we see that go that direction again when this rolls back around, I believe they're part of them people, what the Bible says has been turned over to a reprobate mind, that they can no longer think properly, that they no longer know the difference between good and evil. They no longer have a functioning mind, that they're being controlled by the spiritual host of wickedness, the prince of the power of this air. And to me, it's just freaking unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Think about it. How are you going to react? What's your plan of action when this crap rolls around again? Stand firm in that, man. It's time, son. If you got anything out of this episode, go buy a hat, buy a t-shirt. It helps tremendously, man. And I'll keep these truck talks coming. And Chili will be down there in the dungeon packing y'all's orders for you. And we're going to keep doing work. Love you guys. Enough said.
Damn. Like, what do we do? Shit, I need a famous last words. I need a power cord. I swear, I spend half my life looking for cords these days. Okay, there we go. In you go. Now you're... Come on. Why? What are you caught on? There we go. Okay. Oh, boy. There we go. Yeah, you're not a happy cord. But you're going to work. Yeah, it's going to work for me. Yeah, see, it's happy now. Not always. It's an adventure doing this sometimes. Yeah, and there's a lot of clips coming up. Sometimes that's the advantage. Like, you get to hear everything that's going on other parts of the world. Like, some of these just turned out so amazing. Yeah, like I said, copyright. Now, I'm going to make a full disclaimer before I pull this one up. I just got hired at a really important job. I don't know if I can attend. I will promote it. But sorry, unless you're going to pay my rent, I cannot be walking out of a job. I'm sorry, and a lot of people are like, this is so important. This is so it's like, you know how much it costs to do just even this kind of promotion for them? Do my website, live my life in one of the most expensive cities in Canada. I have to work. If I have work this day, I am working this day. And I don't care if people are like, oh, you're not supporting the movement. It's like, Okay, well, I'm sorry. I need rent. I can't even support the movement if I can't keep my phone bill up. And it is like getting insane here with all the taxes, everything. So yeah, I am promoting this, but if I have work this day, I am not walking out. Sorry, my job is too important. Like, then when you're working in farming, it isn't about you. It's about when either your livestock or your crops are going up. And I'm sorry. Like, I will promote you. If people have videos, I will share them, promote the hell out of you. But I cannot take time off if, from work to walk out. For what? Like, it's not going to hurt the government. It's just going to hurt my employers. So, like, they are counting on, oh God, that's why I slept all day, because it's such a big commitment. And, but if you are able to attend these events and you have the opportunity to take time off work, but a lot of us, we have jobs we cannot just walk away from. I wanted to say that before, and I wanted to say it way before the 20th, so I don't get any hate. And I might get hate for it, for not attending. But if I have work, sorry, work is first, and I'm not trying to be mean. I feel sometimes it's unfair because a lot of us are just living barely paycheck to paycheck, and walking out on a job could cost you your job sometimes, or cost, more. And I'm not, if like, sorry, if I have work, I have work. That's how it is. But I will play this. And I sure as hell ain't going to Vancouver. Yeah, sure as hell ain't going there. I totally agree with this, even though I am bi. I think we need to stop. We need to just let kids be kids. We need to go back like it's like RuPaul hit when I was a kid. There was a show called Soap. It was like a comedy show, and there was a dude in the dress. It was always in media, in the 1980s growing up. Like, trans people were trans people. We never, okay, you're being creative. It was never an issue, but now it's being forced so much that if you misgender someone, if you use the wrong pronouns, if you do not support the chemical castration of children, you are a bigot. You are the baddie. And I'm just like, no, like growing up, we always knew like people were different, but we weren't like feeding big pharma to, for plastic surgery and hormones. We would talk things out. Okay, like, okay, he likes playing with Barbie, whatever, or she likes playing with, you know, oil filters, and hey, give her a few years, she'll be able to rebuild an engine, no problem. We're so focused on, like, I've actually found that this whole gender identity issue, I would almost say issue like a crisis, but it almost feels like that because it's just gone so far. And when we are like telling parents, if you do not mutilate your kid, they're going to kill themselves. That is wrong. I'm sorry. Teenagers are just depressed. Hormones, like, they can be straight and they will be, suicidal. I don't, switching genders will not help you. And all you're doing, like, the thing is, a lot of these people think they're so progressive. They are like, we are like this beacon of hope in this. And hey, I grew up, a lot of us from the older generations grew up in very religiously repressed houses. You are not oppressed. Like a lot of these people, like the, I can, and it's like, who are you fighting? I feel like a lot of these people are just fighting themselves and their own identity because they're insecure. They, it's the more, they've latched on to this almost cultish identity, which never used to be like that. Pride never used to be so insane. And now it just was about, okay, we're gay. We just, and people say about gay marriage, well, it's a little different in Canada because if you live with someone and it can be proven in the court of law, don't ask me how, you've been sleeping with them and you're living together, in 6 months, you're considered common law. So you're actually, if you're cohabitating and making the happy business, you are technically married in Canada. You don't need to sign anything. The government is like, oh, no, you guys are living together. And if you actually do the official marriage, you are paying more taxes. That's a fun thing. Yeah. So that's when gay marriage came out. I was like, if anyone wants to be dumb enough to file the legal paperwork to be officially married, go for it. I don't care. I don't care what you're doing. I don't want to hear about it. But you're gonna pay more taxes. Don't even get married. Like, I know it means a lot to people, and I think a lot of people just want the kind of party of a wedding. Like, just have a party. The number one cause of divorces ironically enough, is the wedding. It just costs so much. Oh,
Once a
yeah.
rising star in Canadian politics, Jagmeet Singh's popularity soared, aided by his
Yeah,
TikTok
he's going
presence. But
down.
now, reduced to a
Down, down,
kingmaker and a
down.
source of amusement in Parliament, his popularity has plummeted. What happened and how exactly? The rising star of Canada suddenly became a joke. Let's explore. Hi and
Oh,
welcome.
he is
I'm your
a
host
joke.
Vedika. Let's begin. Jagmeet Singh's journey began in Scarborough, Ontario, marked by a turbulent family life. His father's alcoholism and abusive behavior led him to take custody of his younger brother Gurratan. Singh's rise in Canadian politics initially seemed promising when he was elected as the leader of the New Democrats in 2017. His popularity surged after a strong debate performance in the 2019 election, yet the party struggled to capitalize on this success due to limited funds. With increased funding and a robust social media presence, Singh's image is now widespread, even on TikTok, where he enjoys a substantial following. However, this online presence, while enhancing his popularity, has also raised questions about his seriousness as a politician, diverting attention from him to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. After the 2019 Canadian federal election, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party found itself in a minority government position, necessitating support from opposition parties for legislative approval. Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, leader of the New Democrat Party, established an informal alliance. Under this understanding, the NDP decided to back the Liberal government on confidence votes and significant policy matters, while the Liberals would consider implementing NDP priorities. This alliance has enabled Trudeau to maintain power, pursue his policy agenda, and avert the risk of a sudden election. In exchange, Singh's NDP has influenced government decisions and secured policy concessions, particularly in healthcare and climate
Just a break
change.
in, no big deal.
This cooperation has brought stability
across
to
the
Canadian
street, don't worry
politics,
about it.
ensuring the government functions effectively despite the Liberal Party's minority status. Furthermore, Singh, having regained his political footing through this alliance, is now positioning himself to challenge Trudeau for the Prime Minister's seat. In the final session of Canada's House of Commons this year, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made a statement that triggered laughter among MPs when he asserted, "When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises." This led to a disruption of laughter and catcalls lasting almost a minute. House Speaker Anthony Rota intervened to restore order, and Singh eventually repeated his statement,
I feel so sorry for
earning
him.
a standing ovation from his caucus members. This incident occurred as Singh addressed the healthcare crisis in Canada and emphasized Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's unfulfilled pledge to hire more healthcare professionals. Singh has threatened to withdraw support from the minority Liberal government if more isn't done to address the healthcare crisis, as outlined in the supply and confidence agreement between the NDP and the Liberals. However, the reality is that Singh's statement may be more aspirational than realistic, as he currently holds the role of a kingmaker rather than a prospective prime minister. As a result, most of NDP supporters now believe NDP should move on from Jagmeet Singh. A recent report from Sudbury paints a concerning picture for Jagmeet Singh, leader of Canada's New Democratic Party. Singh's popularity has experienced a noticeable decline among Canadians, influenced by several significant factors. First, Singh's handling of critical issues, notably the healthcare crisis, has faced criticism. Pediatric emergency rooms have been inundated with children suffering from respiratory illness, highlighting what some perceive as a lack of effective action and communication. Second, Singh's credibility has been eroded by the failure to fulfill campaign promises. His commitment to hiring 7,500 nurses and doctors, if achieved, could have mitigated the healthcare crisis, but the apparent inability to deliver on this pledge has eroded public trust. Additionally, Singh's recent controversial statement in the House of Commons, where he proclaimed his aspirations to become Prime Minister, was met with mockery from fellow MPs, casting doubt on his leadership abilities. Furthermore, Singh's threat to withdraw support from the minority Liberal government if healthcare issues aren't adequately addressed has divided opinions.
Oh, please.
Singh's perceived inability
please
to address
withdraw
critical
support.
issues and
Oh,
fulfill
please.
promises
Oh,
has diminished his
please.
popularity
And the
raised
coalition.
questions about his
Call it
leadership
an
within the party.
election.
Despite once harboring dreams of becoming Canada's Prime
Oh,
Minister,
he's so
Singh
fucked.
is now grappling with the
He
reality
destroyed
of potential
the
leadership
NDP.
loss within his own
I
party.
was
As many
a
Canadians
long-time
believe
supporter.
the NDP would fare
Like,
better
since,
with a
you
different
know,
leader
I
in
was
the
a
next
kid
election.
in
Jagmeet
university,
Singh's
you
journey
know?
from PM aspirations
No more.
to popularity wars
Done.
reflects a
They
political roller
destroyed the
coaster.
party.
His leadership faces turbulence
Greed
due
is
to
evil.
healthcare challenges,
And anyone who
unmet
voted for
promises,
the
and a
Emergency Act
cringe-worthy comments moment.
deserves to be gone
Canadians
from the
now
House of
ponder
Commons.
if the NDP could
They
thrive
deserve
sans Singh.
a
Perhaps
lot.
it's time for a
But
leadership
let's
change
just
in the
get him
NDP.
get the scumbase out. And I kind of, no, there is actually sort of, I think, a break and enter happening. So I just want to check on my balcony. I'm going to pull out this next. It's across the street. Like, there's a medical clinic. So, you know, or somebody's like camping out. Yeah, I'm going to pull up this one. Let's just, because I kind of just want to check on.
No, lockdowns aren't coming your way. That is a false claim. Ladies and gentlemen, the tyrants
Sorry,
are
I'll be
planning
back in a minute.
lockdowns and they're lying to us saying, no, that would never happen. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my beautiful freedom-loving friend, where we like to call out the lies, hypocrisy, and corruption of tyrants, shine the light of awareness on woke absurdities, and highlight the amazing work of other freedom fighters. Lockdowns, they're a beautiful thing, keeps everybody safe and mentally degraded. It's great, very necessary. I wish we had more. And I'm sure you're aware, news broke originally from Alex Jones that the Biden administration is planning to drip in some lockdowns, mask mandates by mid-September, and then by December, there'll be full-blown lockdowns again. Can't wait. There's a new variant. We got to create a variant in response to our lockdowns. Wait a minute, we're supposed to say we're doing it the other way, aren't we? So the news broke, and it looks like that's absolutely their plan. But leave it to factcheck.org, specializing in propaganda and lies you can trust. Factcheck.org comes in hot by saying, no. There's definitely no validity to that. Here's what factcheck.org, our trusted friends in censorship, have to say. No support for viral claim that COVID-19 lockdowns are returning this fall. Cool, no support for it. These are the fact checkers. You can trust them. And if you don't, you're crazy, because the word fact is in the name of the organization. So just don't think about it. They are factual people. Like, they wouldn't be called factcheck.org if they weren't only purporting facts. They published this, there's a viral claim, a lot of stuff going on around online saying the lockdowns are coming. There's no support for that, guys. They published that on August 25th. Great. Thank you for the fact. Appreciate it. And then, reality is just the opposite of what this fact is, because you can take a look. USA Today, on the very same day, look at that, August 25th. They published this. 3 school districts suspend in-person classes due to COVID-19 and other illnesses. Cool, like lockdowns aren't coming, but also the schools are canceling in-person classes. So, yeah. So factcheck.org, it looks like you are incorrect on this. So your batting average is staying about 0%. But the tyrannical playbook of just in time for elections, got to get the mail-in ballot so we can all stay safe. They're running the playbook. We have the factcheck.org. It's like, if you want to know what's real in the world, look at the opposite of what they're telling you is real. But there's other things going on in the playbook. For example, the White House just announced today, which is, this is fun, Joe Biden got COVID, but not just any Joe Biden. This is double And double boosted, Jill Biden tests positive for COVID again. Now, of course, this is a very safe and very effective inoculation, so much so she's double boosted. So that's like, I guess, 4 shots, and she got it again. Weird little breakthrough case. So how is this part of the playbook? Public figures, we're seeing like they're just playing in, hey, we got the disease, so it's coming around. Look, I'm a public figure. You see me getting it. Luckily, I survived because, man, this thing is deadly. But, how much worse would it have been if I hadn't been like quadruple million boosted? Cool. That's part of the conditioning of the mind. If you're letting your brain
when you
be
see someone walking down
and next paragraph down in the playbook of the same thing, using
outdoors
public figures to
with a mask on,
what's coming, what you should expect.
What else is going on?
The View. Have you ever heard of The View? If you like to annoy yourself to death, I'm sure you watch it, and if you don't like to do that, then you probably refuse to watch it. So there's a little clip from The View I'm going to play, and just forgive me because I realize listening to any of these ladies talk, it's torture. So we're going to torture ourselves for 15 seconds. It's like waterboarding.
Just a little bit. Sorry, folks.
As you can see, Whoopi is not here. She has COVID. Yes, it's back. It's back. But she's on the mend. She's on the tail end, and she'll probably be back this week. But sorry, she's not here. For those of you who are looking forward to seeing her.
I wasn't. But
nobody was.
Has the disease, and it's back. Cool. Useful idiots. What are the useful idiots telling me? If I am an idiot, then the useful idiots tell me things and I resonate with them. Yeah. I accept them because like attracts like. Useful idiot, peasant idiot. Cool. It's back. Whoopi got it. Joe Biden got it. Man, seems like we need some lockdowns. Or when lockdowns are implemented, they just make sense. I'll accept them because it's back. Look at these public figures getting it. Dear Lord. Also, just coincidentally in the news, which is not mainstream news,
this is so
but news
up.
That has an earnest effort to
this is way more fucked up than
reality and truth.
I didn't watch this
oddly
one.
enough, the CDC removes adverse event reports from website. That's awesome. And you can check out the full article on the Daily Wire and other places.
This is good news.
New York Times are reporting this as well.
Or important information.
We don't need reporting of adverse events from this thing that we're going to be ramping up, which, by the way, Joe Biden has announced he's going to be asking for funding to develop a new one that works. Those are his words. He said we need to develop one that works. The old one worked pretty well. Worked well enough at probably what it was designed to do that a lot of adverse events were reported, and because knowledge and statistics about things that you are coerced into taking, it's just really bad to know those things. If you're going to inject something in your body, the less you know about it, the better. That's science. So in a move to help public health, the CDC
says, what they told us.
The shenanigans that happen and can devastate people's health with this thing that we desperately want you to get, we realize you're better off if you just don't know about those. So we'll just remove those from the website. And, everything is super underreported to begin with, but what is reported...
I'm going to pause this for a second just because I'm going to bring up a really important fact. Under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we have the right to bodily autonomy and the right to know what all the medical ingredients are in any medication a doctor is trying to give us. This didn't happen. This has been proven by Dr. Bonnie's emails. She knew this was going to go bad. And yet she just was like reading her emails, even though a lot of them were like really kind of benign, or she was very vague. And I hope she's enjoying her shoes line and her vineyard for all the blood on her hands. We lost more people in BC over her term than we did all of COVID because of overdoses. And now we have legal drugs. There is no safe supply. Get off the fucking drugs. I'm sorry, I can't put it any way simpler. Yet our government is enabling this. And I feel like it's a form of gentrification to turn us, like I saw what happened in Portland. That was ugly. 72 days of straight protests, like watching online. And I was like, oh my God. Like I got to a point, I actually complained to RT television because you know what? One of their reporters was trying to burn a Bible. No, I was just like, if you're gonna like be Russian interference, be a little more subtle about it. Like, don't just pay some like dumb kid. And you know what was the funniest thing about that whole footage? They're all like standing around and it's like, oh, none of us can start a fire. Did anyone yeah, I guess none of us took Boy Scouts. I was just like, oh my God, if you're going to like do this kind of propaganda, at least do it well. At least get that, like, you couldn't even start a book on fire. Like, pathetic. Sorry. But it's filtering up where this whole method of harm reduction is going sideways. It is called enabling. It is not harm reduction. It is called enabling at this point. And I think not that one. Where was I? Yeah, I have more clips. And I have a whole other, I think 1 or 2 pages I did not pull up the other day just because, yeah, I like her. Like, should turn that. That one's long, but I might pull that one up. I'm just gonna scroll through quickly. Oh boy. Yeah, trigger warnings. Like, here's a preview. Lot on Maui, just because. Okay, I'm just gonna go through all this one by one. I'm gonna get the copyright strikes again. Just spank me. Spank me harder. Yeah, copyright strikes. They're awesome. But some of this is important, or I
Also,
thought it was interesting. This one's long.
First of all, that is speech. And in the context of education, we want people to say provocative things. That's the robust exchange of ideas and the preparation of young people for life in a democracy where people vehemently disagree with each other requires students to grow a thick skin to understand.
So there's already some controversy about the meaning of what it means to have anti-harassment measures in place. But it seems that by the time you get to 2010, that debate, when you're looking at major universities, for example, they've been more or less choosing a side in that debate as to whether or not you prioritize anti-harassment over free speech.
Because I think by 2010, it wasn't as clear as it would be a decade later, or even 5 years later. I think that what you're describing probably is a better description of the mid-2010s, after the Obama administration had gotten involved in this issue and changed its interpretation of Title IX. So what happened was the White House convenes this summit in 2010, and I'm very loosely paraphrasing here. They basically say, look, federal precedent does not allow us to tackle what we consider harassing speech because of students' First Amendment rights. But what we can do is we can use Title IX and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which concerns race, and we can interpret these to mean that you cannot speak in ways that create
it's
an
even
environment
more
in which
complicated
certain
in
groups of
Canada.
people feel uncomfortable.
It's even more
meaning
complicated.
That's the interpretation that they give to anti-harassment. Now,
like I pulled
over the
these
next
up
3
so I
years,
can understand what's going on
civil rights
below the border,
organizations that
because
had already been
what's going on
starting to
up
think
here
seriously
is
about taking on the trans
so much
issue,
worse.
because they had historically been very focused on gay rights,
Canada's insane
especially
right
marriage,
now.
military service, employment discrimination. They started filing complaints with the Office for Civil Rights in a number of K through 12 schools, saying, "Look, we have a student here identifies as the opposite sex, wants to use the locker rooms or the bathrooms of the sex that he feels comfortable in, but isn't allowed to do so, and that's leading to harassment by his peers and." The exclusion of the student from his desired facilities in and of itself feels harassing to the student, right? It feels like he's being harassed by the school. And isn't this a reasonable interpretation of what you, Office for Civil Rights, have just called harassment under Title IX?
It's complicated.
And so the Office for Civil Rights launches investigations.
Yeah.
And as you probably know, Rehan, sometimes the process is the punishment. And schools who had to go through these expensive and very embarrassing investigations were very quickly pressured into signing consent decrees with the Office for Civil Rights, where they unilaterally agreed to change their policies, even though there had never been any change in statute or in court decisions. This was just OCR saying, this is how we want you to interpret the law.
So there's this incredible leverage of these federal agencies interpreting a law drafted decades ago in this very different context. And it's not something where there was democratic deliberation around it, but, naturally you're running a school and you don't want this to become a massive distraction, so you change your policies.
Right, that's right. And what happens over the next few years is that federal courts and the Office for Civil Rights take incremental steps past one another to expand the reach of Title IX into this new area of policy, the accommodation of students who reject their sex. And each one of those institutions says, I'm not doing anything new. I'm just following the guidance or the precedent set by the other institutions. So that allowed judges, who are always very anxious about having their opinions be construed as innovation, as policymaking, right, as legislating from the bench. That allowed judges to say, this is nothing new. We're just deferring under canons of administrative law. We're just deferring to the Office for Civil Rights, while the Office for Civil Rights in its own decrees and its own guidance documents said, we're not doing anything new. We're just deferring to the courts. And so you get this incremental expansion of the policy regime without...
There's a strangely recursive element to it, because you have one agency saying, I'm deferring to you, the other one saying, I'm deferring to you, back and forth. I wonder just briefly, if you could tell us a bit about the Office of Civil Rights, if there's some sort of sociological dimension, who are the people who gravitate to serving in this administrative agency? I imagine there are many occasions where even in the Obama or Biden administrations, people will feel as though, look, this is not something that I'm focused on day to day. There are people I appoint to these roles, and perhaps they have a certain inclination, or perhaps a certain kind of person is drawn to serving in those agencies.
Yes, I think you accurately characterize what goes on there. The type of person who is attracted to the Office for Civil Rights from the get-go is likely to be, a lawyer who has a strong belief that America has a long way to go in terms of civil rights, who has a very expansive and probably not very consensus-based interpretation of civil rights laws and judicial rulings. So that agency, especially under democratic administrations, because remember that unlike in European parliamentary systems, the American bureaucracy by design is a lot more politicized. It's a lot more open to political appointments. And so Democrat administrations are more likely to staff the high ranks of OCR with activists. And we've seen this with both the Biden and the Obama administrations' appointment of Catherine Lehman to head OCR. She now is still the chief of OCR, and she was during most of the Obama administration. And she is the very definition of an ideologically driven activist, kind of very far to the left of most Americans on issues of race and gender. She has a long history of involvement with the ACLU. And that's, another dimension of this is what political scientists sometimes call issue networks. And this refers to a network of professionals, many of them policy entrepreneurs, inside and outside of government, that occupy various positions, sometimes in advocacy groups, and then they go into government, and then they go back to the advocacy organization.
I'm suing you and I'm outside government in the advocacy group, then I'm inside government, and then I'm actually still connected to the people in the advocacy group I was once a part of, and there's this kind of push and pull, but we are kind of moving the institutions together.
That's right. So just to give you an example, in the Fourth Circuit case, GG versus Gloucester, which was the first federal circuit ruling in favor of a transgender student plaintiff against a school district, the ACLU was the organization involved in litigation there. Catherine Lehman was in the Obama Office for Civil Rights, and she is also an ACLU lawyer. And one of the judges, at least one of the judges, maybe even two, I have to check my notes, but at least one of the three judges on the Fourth Circuit who ruled in favor of the plaintiff is also a former ACLU person. And you see this, this is a fairly consistent finding in how the civil rights state works nowadays, where you have lawyers who maybe even know each other through these advocacy organization networks, but regardless are very ideologically and institutionally aligned, who kind of rotate in and out of government in positions of influence.
And because these were issues that, in the past at least, were low salience, these are things where these issue networks are able to move the ball very far without much scrutiny. And then suddenly you wake up and suddenly the landscape is just drastically different than it had been just a few years ago.
That's right. And I think one of the reasons why gender ideology is such an incoherent mishmash of different ideas and attitudes that are in contradiction with each other is because the American civil rights state allows for extensive policy innovation on the basis of analogies, highly abstract, superficially plausible analogies. And transgender rights perfectly illustrates how this works. Because what happened during the 2010s is that you had advocacy organizations making claims in federal court that transgender students should not be excluded from the bathroom of their choice, because doing so would be not much different from excluding Black kids from all white schools. Even Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, the Obama administration's Attorney General, when she justified her division's decision to sue the state of North Carolina over HB 2, which was a law that requires people to use the bathroom consistent with their biological sex. Even in her speech, she said, it wasn't long ago when states like North Carolina had signs above restrooms and water fountains that kept people out based on a distinction without a difference. Now, of course, whether it's a distinction without a difference in the transgender context is the entire debate in a nutshell. Yeah, you can't just say it's similar to Black civil rights, case closed. And we've seen the use of analogy very successful in the United States. We still see it all the time now. Anytime transgender activists want to, criticize a certain law, they'll usually say things like, they're coming for us now. Next, they're going to come for gay and lesbian Americans. Next, they're going to want to dismantle same-sex marriage. It's always analogies to gay rights. And the same thing with conversion therapy that you mentioned earlier. The idea that trying to help a child who feels distressed or alienated from her body come to terms with her sex and not have to go through risky and experimental medical procedures, the idea that is conversion therapy is not only implausible on its face, it contradicts decades of research.
I know.
But it's managed to gain a foothold in the medical community and, more importantly, in the judicial and the legal profession, precisely because of its superficial analogy to gay rights.
Leora, there's
Conversion
another
therapy
dimension
is
to
illegal
the
in
controversy over
Canada,
gender
and it
ideology,
should go both
which
ways.
is the role of medical institutions,
You know,
medical practice,
if we
and
were
how that's
telling
intersecting
you
with
can't be
this,
we should be
with this
telling
dilemma.
kids,
So talk to us
you
about
shouldn't
how
go
medical
on
schools and
dangerous
medical
medical
practitioners have been changing the playing
experimental
field.
And in the United States,
things
unlike in
because
European countries,
you're
we don't have a powerful centralized healthcare
being
bureaucracy
fed a lie.
that's able to issue treatment guidelines and directives from top to bottom and have its directives enforced and respected. And that has a lot to do with our tradition of individualism, of respect for the sacrosanct relationship of the doctor and the patient, and our distrust of centralized authority. But the practical effect of that is that the institutions that are set up to make most medical decisions with regard to clinical practice guidelines, standards of care, are the professional medical associations. So, for example, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, and the World Professional Association for Transgender Health have been the three most important medical associations shaping how the medical community thinks about and responds to children who feel alienated from their bodies. Now, what's interesting about these groups is that they are first and foremost trade unions. So, they call themselves professional medical associations, but the word professional here really has two meanings. One meaning is they're professional in the sense that, you and I would show up in a suit and tie for an interview. They act professionally, ideally. But the other meaning of professional is that they are associations of professionals, of highly trained, highly credentialed professionals. And so that ambiguity, I think, can easily mislead people into thinking that if a trade association of professionals says something, what it's saying is professional. And that, certainly in the case of gender medicine, that's clearly not the case. And it's interesting to me that we, Americans, even on the left, readily recognize this problem when it comes to teachers' unions. Teachers' unions claim that all they care about is education. We know that that's not true. Obviously, teachers' unions, insofar as they're staffed with teachers, care about education. But in any case, or the interest of students, but in any case where the interest of students conflicts with the interest of teachers, teachers' unions are always going to prefer the interest of teachers.
So to put a fine point on it, these are organizations that are not solely engaged in neutral scientific inquiry on a question of public interest, but rather they are advocates for a particular approach for an industry, and that they need to be understood as advocates.
I don't want to be too cynical about it. Again, these associations are staffed with professionals in the field. So presumably, the American Academy of Pediatrics is staffed with people who care deeply about pediatric health. It's just that the organization has different incentives than would dictate that they always care about patient health. So in a situation, for example, where a non-insignificant number of their members have engaged in a medical practice that is now thought to be harmful or unscientific, these organizations are very likely going to try to defend those doctors and not back away from that position. And there's multiple examples of this throughout history of medical associations making recommendations that are in conflict with patient health. I think the most easy to recognize for most people is, when big pharma dollars influence, for example, the American Pain Society, APS, was a main driver behind the opioid epidemic because it said that, drugs like OxyContin have a very low addiction rate and they're safe to use and so on and so forth. It was later discovered that they received a large amount of money from Purdue Pharma. But here, in the case of gender medicine, the influence is not primarily that of drug companies, although it seems like there is some influence of drug companies behind the scenes. It's more ideology. It's what I've been calling institutional capture, meaning the way in which a small, highly organized and well-motivated group of clinicians can impose their policy preferences on against the will or the indifference, I should say, of a diffuse membership that either doesn't know what's going on or doesn't want to stick their necks out and say something, or who reasonably believe that different areas of pediatrics have different types of expertise, and they're going to defer to those who have expertise in gender issues.
So there's a kind of two-step process in which
we need to
manufacture
thinking about
what you might call a false consensus, and then having manufactured that false consensus, then institutional capture flows from that.
I was just talking with a friend, and we used to limit plastic surgery with minors. We used to limit, all sort. You wouldn't give a 6-year-old, steroids, and now we are. We are, like, when I was in high school, back in the late 90s, let's date myself, I don't care. You can get breast implants until you were 18, and you needed a year of psychological evaluation before you even got them. And now we are endorsing giving 6-year-olds hormones and surgeries and puberty block. Like, no, we need to stop this. I'm sorry. And there are a lot of trans people who are saying, I wish I had this when I was a kid. Well, as a tomboy, you would have been the ones telling me, I need to get my breasts hacked off. I need to get my ovaries removed, my uterus. Oh, you like playing with trucks. You must be a boy. Let's just get big pharma into you and switch you. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I'm pulling out some of this because I am genuinely concerned. And it is taking people in the rainbow community, to say this is wrong. Like, there is nothing wrong with being a femboy or a tomboy. Or, I'm a girly girl, or I like the softball and my plaid jacket and a big old muff. There is something beautiful to that. But we've lost that. It's like, and a lot of these people who are really pushing it for it think they're so progressive. Oh, we're stunning and brave. And meanwhile, it's like, no, you are being fed a lie of commercialism and big pharma. And hey, man, if that's what you want to do to your body, that's fine. As an adult, you start pushing it on kids, pushing all of this on kids. And like, in the 1980s, it was so different. I'm going to say this again. We all knew the boundaries as kids. Now it's being so manipulated. And when it is so divisively political, it is scary. I'm going to finish pulling up the rest of this clip. I really think he has good points. I think people should think about them, because so much of this, we're getting pressured into, if you do not accept this, you are the worst person in the world. You are a piece of shit. You're a bigot, you're a racist, you're homophobic, you're transphobic. You are all these labels because you're trying to say question and just say can we have a little common sense here? Because some of this seems a little more than we should be exposing kids to. And I'm, if I'm going to get hate for saying that, good. Because I kind of wonder about the people who are like, oh, no, you need the hormone blockers. You need to, it's almost, I worry more about them than anyone who's speaking out against this. And there are I have a few good posts, I think from, oh God, that still hurts. I was so damn lucky. I literally, like, I leant down and I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. I'm going to lose my interview. I know that's so dumb, but I really was that scared yesterday. I really wanted to stream. And even today, I was like, it's probably good I just slept and let it rest, and I didn't have to go to the hospital because that's like an 8-hour wait. Welcome to, Maple Republic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're gonna pull
there may well be dissenting voices, but life for those dissenting voices becomes much more difficult when it appears as though there is a professional consensus, and so that gives leverage to,
but you have to be,
say, the activists within the organization
who
then want to unify the organization.
So I'm gonna kind of let my stream go,
a given practice or approach,
or my blog go,
right. And that's what we've been seeing in the
and
American
then
medical field. Talking about this
it might be a few hours.
Point, the AAP, the Endocrine Society, and WPATH are the three major
and some of this is really important.
Either treatment guidelines or policy statements in support of gender-affirming care for kids. The other medical associations, by and large,
I find it interesting. I don't care if you do.
And
you don't
so
have to
that
watch.
gives the appearance that it's not just 3 organizations that are aligned on this issue; it's the entire medical community. And that, of course, assumes that the medical associations credibly speak on behalf of all of their members. And certainly on this issue, not only is there no evidence that that's the case, but there's actually growing evidence that that's not the case.
So I wonder if you could bring in the comparative context here. You mentioned earlier on that when you're looking at, and in your work you've often discussed, the fact that when you're looking at other market democracies in Western Europe, for example, oftentimes you're seeing a very different approach to pediatric gender interventions writ large. So talk to us about that, how the decentralized nature of the kind of medical field in the US has led us down a different path than what you're seeing in these other countries.
Gender-affirming model of care was adopted in the early 2010s in Sweden, Finland, the UK. And what happened over the next decade is as more and more evidence of the harms of this model and its unscientific basis came out, these countries, because they have centralized healthcare bureaucracies, they have a mechanism for dealing with that. So, in Finland, for example, Finland has a strong public health insurance regime, and most people are insured by it. And that means that in order for certain treatments to be covered under national health insurance, they first have to go through a process of scientific vetting. And that typically means systematic reviews of evidence, which is the highest form of evidence evaluation in evidence-based medicine. And so you have organization, the institution called COHERE, the Council for Choices in Healthcare, which is Finland's main body to evaluate the evidence base of certain treatments and therefore recommend whether they should be funded or not. And COHERE did a systematic review and found that, in fact, the evidence for the benefits of these interventions is extremely weak. And the same happened in Sweden with its SBU, and of course in the UK with an institute called the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, or NICE. So when you have a centralized healthcare bureaucracy backed up by a strong public health insurance regime, you have the institutional incentives to make sure that the treatments that are funded, because they're funded with scarce taxpayer dollars, that they're only funding evidence-based treatments. In the United States, things are, of course, very different. Our healthcare system is, to put it mildly, a mess.
In Canada,
it's a mixture of public and private options, public and private institutions. It's highly decentralized.
Our tax dollars are paying for
It's not just decentralized from the federal to the state level, but it's also decentralized from the state level through its medical boards to medical associations.
Like, you wouldn't give a 6-year-old breast implants, but that's essentially
it all starts
what
from
we're
a position
doing.
of deep distrust of centralized authority and rulemaking. And you saw this, for example, in the lead up to the passage of Obamacare, when Republicans were complaining about so-called death panels. And what they meant by that is, we don't want there to be a bureaucracy that rations care, that decides what's going to get treated and what's not according to considerations of economy. And of course, I'm somewhat sympathetic to that argument, But at the same time, it does have its downsides. And I think what we're seeing now with pediatric gender medicine is very much one of its downsides.
Yeah.
Because the incentives to conduct systematic evidence reviews and to hold accountable a particular institution and particular people simply don't exist in the United States.
Yeah.
There's another dimension that's worth touching on, which is the dramatic increase in the number of young people who report experiencing gender dysphoria. Now, you've talked about how the kind of institutional context has changed, the role of the civil rights state. You've also talked about how the kind of medical understanding of gender dysphoria and what are appropriate interventions has changed because of the separate dynamic of institutional capture in the professions in our highly decentralized context in which these professional associations in which civil society play a larger role than some centralized bureaucracy. But then you just do have this brute fact that relative to when this debate was really heating up, when you had this bullying conversation in the early 2010s, it's just gender dysphoria has just become incredibly widespread. And I wonder if you could talk to us about that and if there are any interactions between that population level shift and these kind of institutional shifts that you've been describing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the causes behind the explosion of transgender identity and gender dysphoria diagnoses, and those two things are not necessarily the same, although there is obviously a strong overlap between the two. Over the past decade and a half is, of course, a subject of controversy. I think looking at all the available evidence that we have, it seems very likely, I don't want to say anything with certainty, but it says extremely likely that the reason why we're seeing increases of anywhere between, so just to put some numbers on it, when you and I were in high school, Rehan, we probably did not know a single student who identified as transgender. In fact, the word probably had not even entered mainstream parlance at that time.
It kind of did with me. I knew it was.
Definitely not students who wanted to be regarded as members of the opposite sex. Now, according to national surveys and surveys done on particular school districts throughout the country, the percentage of students who are identifying as transgender in K-12 schools is between 2.1 and 9.2%. So in Pittsburgh schools, for example, almost 1 in 10 high school students identifies as transgender. And that's, of course, that's a monumental change in youth culture within the course of less than a generation. Similarly, with gender dysphoria diagnoses, the condition, even in the DSM-5, which was published in 2013, it says that the prevalence of gender dysphoria in the adult population is between 0.002% and 0.014%, depending on sex. So that's in adults, and it's extremely rare. But now, we've seen over the past few years, we have some good data coming out of investigative reporting by Reuters, showing that the rates of gender dysphoria diagnoses among kids ages 6 to 17 have gone up between 2017 and 2020. They went up by 20% annually. And between 2020 and 2021, they went up by 70%. Mind you, that is the year of COVID when kids were at home by themselves, mostly on their phones.
And there's also a change when you're looking at sex. So, for example, when you're looking at gender nonconforming behavior, transgender identification, it used to be mostly boys when you're looking at minors. And now it seems that it is very, very heavily skewed towards girls.
That's right. So the two classic presentations of gender dysphoria, or as that was called until recently, gender identity disorder, the majority of presentations was adult males. So these were adult male transsexuals wanted to pass as women. There's a theory that many of them are autogynephiliac, meaning they have erotic attraction to the image of themselves as women. But there were a few. It was known that there were some kids, young children in particular, and especially boys, who also started showing signs of kind of cross-gender behavior and feelings. And there was a theory in the air that at least some of these boys are likely to grow up and be those older adults, right? That there's a kind of connection between these two phenomena. What happened over the past 15 years is that a new subgroup, a new cohort starts to emerge. And that is teenagers with no prior history of gender-related issues, gender-related distress, beginning in toddlerhood. So these are teenagers whose problems with feelings of alienation from their own bodies, their own sex, first come up during or after the onset of puberty. And most of these teenagers are girls, not boys. And the vast majority of them have significant coexisting psychological problems: anxiety, depression, suicidality, eating disorders, ADHD. Autism is extremely common in this cohort. And so, there was kind of an assumption on part of the gender-affirming advocates, the clinicians who practiced this intervention, that the same research that applies to these young boys is going to apply flawlessly in the new cohort. And of course, that's what the European countries have gradually recognized is not the case. And we have emerging evidence that social influences are behind the explosion in this new third category of adolescent onset, or as we tend to call it now, rapid onset gender dysphoria.
I wonder, Lior, you have done tremendous journalism, you've done tremendous scholarly work understanding this incredible shift, the ways in which these different changes in our institutions have contributed to the ongoing controversy over gender identity in American life. Talk to us a bit about where we're headed next. So I don't need to tell you that this has become a very politically polarized debate, and you have a number of state legislatures around the country that have sought to, for example, restrict pediatric gender interventions. This has, of course, caused a great deal of controversy. But I wonder if you could talk to us about, first of all, those legislative battles. And then separately, when you're talking about these professional associations, when you're talking about the institutional capture of these kind of core, very influential medical institutions, I wonder, you can pass all the laws that you want, but it seems like that is something that would be very difficult to dislodge or change. So talk to us about those two aspects.
Sure. Okay, so, I'm often asked, Rehan, how is this going to end? When and how? And I think there's a number of factors that's going to bring this scandal, if not to a grinding halt, then at least it's going to, something close to it. The first is, of course, lawsuits filed by kids who were harmed by these interventions, and that's going to take some time. Partly because, it takes time for regret to manifest, for the kids to come to terms with what they've done to themselves. Especially with girls, getting double mastectomies, for example. What's going to happen when they're in their 30s and all of a sudden they realize they can't breastfeed and they regret their decision and so on and so forth. So the first thing that has to happen is malpractice lawsuits. And there's two barriers to malpractice lawsuits from detransitioners right now. The first barrier is that states' statutes of limitations are 1 to 3 years. And frankly, it just takes longer than that for most people to realize their mistake, because we know that there's a period of a year or two after these medical treatments are initiated. We call it sometimes the hormone high, which is where, due to placebo effects, Hawthorne effects, whatever, the kids who get these medications feel better in the short term. So many of them are just going to miss the window of statutes of limitations. The other problem to these malpractice lawsuits is that standards of care are established in litigation, in malpractice litigation. That's another kind of unique phenomenon of American healthcare. And as long as you have the entire medical establishment, or I shouldn't say that because that's misleading. As long as you have most major medical associations in their official capacity lining up behind the doctors who are being sued, it's very unlikely that a judge, a federal judge or a state judge, is going to second guess the medical community on that regard. So that's one avenue for ending the scandal and the barriers there. The other is, as you mentioned, there's now 20 states that have enacted laws that aim to impose age restrictions, age limits on the administration of these treatments. And every single one of these laws, if it isn't already being litigated in the courts, will be litigated in the courts. And we have faced a number of significant barriers, not least of which is that the medical associations always line up against the states. But some of the other impediments have to do with the unique nature of courts as policymaking institutions. So, for example,
sorry, I was eating.
You think about a scenario in which you have a state, let's say Texas, or Kentucky, or Tennessee, trying to defend its age restrictions in court. You have the Attorney General's office who get this case that falls into their lap. They have
big.
A few weeks to familiarize themselves with a huge amount of medical literature and medical policy in the United States and in other countries. And they do this while they're also working on other cases. And they're going to be
one for the Globe and Mail.
Lining up against, on the other side, the ACLU, or the Transgender Law Center, which has been doing nothing but this type of litigation for the last 8-9 years.
And where the issue networks see to it that you have folks who come from these advocacy organizations or are tightly connected to them, who are
I might just throw it on my
within
blog.
various agencies.
That's right. And
Canada's
our side of this
wildfires have
issue
been
also has
breaking
mission
records
networks, but
this
they're
year.
not nearly as well funded and well developed as the other
More
side's
land
mission
has been
networks.
burned.
But here's the kicker. Is that it's going to be tremendously difficult to help. I mean, as talented and ambitious as the attorneys in these state attorneys general offices are, it's going to be very difficult to bring them up to speed in the space of just a few short weeks to be able to cross-examine the most carefully selected, clever experts of the other side, whereas vice versa is not necessarily true. You have ACLU lawyers who have been cutting their teeth on this issue for years, and they're much better at doing cross-examinations on this type of issue. So that's one example of a barrier. There are many others. Just to give one more example, because it's become extremely relevant in these lawsuits, the ACLU has been very, very capable of getting judges to buy into what I've been calling a no true Scotsman fallacy. And what they've argued is, it's reasonable for judges to defer to experts, to medical experts on this question, but who counts as an expert? Well, according to the ACLU, you are only an expert in gender-affirming care if you yourself practice gender-affirming care. And you can see why that would be a no true Scotsman type fallacy, because by definition, if you're a doctor who doesn't think that gender-affirming care is a science-based and ethical practice, you won't do it. And if that's the grounds for being excluded from having your testimony taken seriously by a judge, and that's, for example, what happened in Arkansas, then the playing field is tilted from the get-go. So half of the battle that the states are going to be facing over the next few months is getting judges to not buy into the no true Scotsman fallacy of who counts as an expert.
Lior, I'm curious, what is the space for therapists and medical practitioners who dissent from what we might call the gender ideology orthodoxy, who are saying that I want to take a more exploratory therapeutic approach rather than just assume that we've got to embrace what is called gender affirming care from the get-go?
Right. Great question. And, just to say from the get-go, exploratory therapy in this context is absolutely crucial for achieving what in medical parlance is called differential diagnosis. Meaning making sure that if you are going to medicalize gender incongruence, cross-gender feelings and behaviors, that you are reasonably certain that it's because those feelings and behaviors are evidence of a lifelong struggle that's not going to go away at the end of adolescence, as opposed to gender dysphoria being caused by some underlying unresolved. So exploratory therapy is absolutely crucial to minimizing the risk of false positives, and that's what the Europeans have understood, and we still haven't. So the question then is, if you're a parent or if you're a clinician and you want to either send your kid to one of these clinicians or you want to practice it yourself, to what extent can you do so? And the short answer to that is, and I regret to say this, that especially in blue states, there's about 20 states that have passed a variety of laws or regulations that really ramp up pressure on clinicians, especially mental health clinicians, to not do that kind of careful exploratory work. And the reason is because these states have classified that type of exploratory work as conversion therapy. They've done so under, again, the very superficial analogy to homosexuality, where we do know with a high degree of confidence that
we are going backwards.
Psychotherapy to get a person to not be gay is not only likely to end in failure 99% of the time, but is also likely to cause harm.
If you're an adult and you want to change your sex,
if you look at how these
no
laws
problem.
are structured,
If you're a kid,
they'll say things like,
it's
the medical community recommends never to do
hands off the
exploratory
kids.
therapy for sexual orientation or
Sorry,
gender identity. In other
it's
words,
gross.
the gender identity
It's wrong and
component of
screaming.
this is funneled in through or piggybacks on the sexual orientation component. I should mention, second of all, that the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018 came out with its policy statement. And the clear argument of the policy statement is any approach, any therapeutic approach that is not affirmative, meaning that doesn't automatically, uncritically, from the get-go, agree with the child that he or she, in fact, is transgender, is conversion therapy.
That seems so peculiar. It seems like something that really goes against the ethic of the profession. The idea of exploratory therapy seems like something that is, a well-established practice. So I imagine part of what happens is that, you're going to refer patients to clinicians just out of a sense of risk aversion. Kind of, you don't want to find yourself running afoul of these laws. So you're just kind of shunting patients to those therapists who decided, I will not do anything remotely resembling exploratory therapy.
That's exactly right, and I've heard this not just from parents who have run the gauntlet in especially blue states, although this happens in red states too, blue states like California, but also from clinicians in the field who treat and work with gender distressed, gender confused, gender dysphoric teenagers. And what they say is, I get a patient, because they usually do exploratory therapy, otherwise they wouldn't be talking to me. But my colleague, for example, who does, who is afraid of doing exploratory therapy because they're worried about losing their license. If they get a kid and the kid comes in and says, I feel like I might be trans, they say, well, that's not really my area of expertise. I'm going to refer you to the gender clinic. If you're in Oregon, for example, you just refer them to Dornbacher Children's Hospital Gender Clinic. Say we only have affirming clinicians. We don't have, which is a code for, we don't do exploratory therapy. We affirm only. And so, for example, if the kid shows up, as is very, very commonly the case, if the kid shows up at one of these clinics and has severe coexisting mental health problems, schizophrenia, eating disorders, ADHD, everything, you name it, the assumption of these affirming clinicians is that those psychological problems are because of their unaffirmed gender. And therefore, that the only way to resolve them, the only way to address them in a proper way, is to do a gender transition. In other words, they adhere to an academic theory called the minority stress theory.
Lior, you talked about some of the obstacles facing state-level lawmakers who are seeking to curb pediatric gender interventions. But I wonder if you could tell us a bit about what state lawmakers ought to do. Are there things that they can do that will make their approaches more resilient in order to try to create more space, for example, for therapists seeking to do exploratory therapy, trying to ensure that clinicians are taking a more evidence-based approach and being more cautious?
Sure. So let me say two things in that regard. One is with regard to the therapeutic side, the diagnostic side, which is really where the exploratory therapy comes in. I think it's absolutely crucial for states, and I don't suggest for 1 second that blue states are going to do this because they're just not, but it's absolutely crucial for states to clarify in their laws, in their regulations, and even in the kind of the public comments of politicians that clinicians should, in fact, must do careful exploratory therapy. Even if you believe that the supposedly more conservative Dutch protocol, which is the protocol for transitioning kids that came out of the Netherlands in the 90s and 2000s, even if you adhere to that relatively more conservative protocol, it also calls for lengthy psychological exploration prior to initiation of any hormonal interventions. So I think at minimum, states have to take their thumb off the scale and say to the mental health professions, you need to do careful exploratory therapy or we're going to run into serious problems here. But again, we're nowhere near there. And in fact, blue states have been going in the opposite direction in trying to make...
Is that something that would survive a legal challenge? I wonder, is your view that that's something that would be a bit more resilient given the opposition you're likely to get?
So So you mean like if a red state, for example, were to issue a law or regulation trying to beef up provisions for exploratory therapy? Yeah, probably. I mean, the other side of this is challenging in the courts every single provision and every single regulation that touches on this issue. They're leaving no stone unturned. So yes, it absolutely would be challenged in the courts. So that's one component, making sure that there is adequate room for exploratory therapy and differential diagnosis. The other is, there's a question of, is banning these procedures for kids under 18, imposing age restrictions, is that preferable to the European approach? And what the Europeans are doing now is Sweden, Finland, the UK, and Norway looks to be joining soon. Is they're saying, look, as a general rule, we're not going to allow this in kids anymore, but we're going to make extreme exceptions, or I should say exceptions in extreme situations where there's been very careful screening, where the kid, by and large, fits the profile of the original Dutch protocol. And importantly, because we recognize that the evidence base for these interventions is so incredibly weak, we're going to require that these kids only be eligible for hormonal interventions if they're enrolled in clinical research. Now, so the question is there room for an approach like that in the United States? Part of me thinks that that's where this is headed, that it's going to emerge as a kind of a compromise between the blue state approach of total deregulation and the red state approach of total prohibition. Whether that's good or not is a separate question. I think one thing to contemplate here is that even the Dutch protocol, the supposedly more conservative gold standard of research in this area, and it's been called gold standard even by American advocates of gender affirming care, even by the WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, even that Dutch study has been found to be very low quality evidence in European systematic reviews, and that is because the Dutch study suffers from severe methodological problems, especially problems of bias. So if you're taking a step back and looking and asking the question, is there a good research base for doing even what the Europeans are doing? The answer is that they have recognized that it's still an ongoing medical experiment and that we don't know the results. And it's very possible that when we start to see the long-term consequences, mental health consequences of these interventions, even in the Dutch cohort, we'll see that no, in fact, there's no justification ever to do early intervention in children. We don't know that yet with high degree of confidence. There are some people who say that no child is born in the wrong body and there's no justification ever to give these treatments. I understand that argument. I'm sympathetic to it. But I also allow for the possibility that some adults really do suffer from acute gender dysphoria. Some of them report that their feelings started very early in childhood. And some of them report that they feel better after undergoing some kind of medical procedure, even if that's not necessarily true because of placebo effects or any other confounding factor. It does have some significance for the debate. And so, I force myself to remain open-minded to the possibility that some kids may benefit from this, but where we are right now does not permit even that to be said.
So if you were advising a state-level lawmaker, you would urge them to try to make their approach a bit broader so that you allow for these possibilities, so that you kind of build that in just because that's something that helps you build the case, and also that allows for the possibility that future clinical research might yield different answers.
So look, I mean, in theory, that's possible. In theory, yes. But here's another complication here. We have lots of evidence over the past few years that the doctors who gravitate into this field of research and practice and who actually do the gatekeeping, or should be doing the gatekeeping but don't, who prescribe these hormones, who perform these surgeries, they are radical ideologues. Not all of them, but most of them, or at least many of them are. They don't understand the basic principles of evidence-based medicine. We saw this in the example of the Texas House of Representative hearings over SB 14, where you had doctors advocating for pediatric sex change modification, showing not only that they don't know the research behind this issue, but that they don't even understand the basic principles of how evidence-based medicine works. So this is one of those areas of potential state regulation where you say, a profession is constantly furnishing evidence that it's unable and unwilling to regulate itself, to impose any guardrails, to exercise any self-restraint. And so what is a state medical board to do in that situation? What are state regulators to do? And they just defer to the experts to exercise self-restraint after years of evidence showing that they won't? So that's another complication here, that even if you believe that, the European approach in theory is preferable to the red state American approach, you run into the problem that unlike the European clinicians, and I don't want to glamorize the European clinicians because they certainly have some activists there too, but the American medical community that's engaged in this area of practice does not seem to be nearly as responsible as its European counterparts.
This is an enormously complex set of issues, and you've really enriched the discussion of this in the country writ large. You've written so much brilliant work on this. I wonder if you could leave us with some thoughts about the lessons we might take away from the complex relationship between the civil rights state and this quite significant cultural phenomenon. How should we think about just how we're approaching administrative agencies and how they might shape culture? Are there things that lawmakers, policymakers ought to think about as you're thinking about who should be serving the Office of Civil Rights,
really
who should be
need to
staffing these
actually
agencies?
start
What are
thinking
the
about this.
attitudes and inclinations they ought to bring to this work, given how consequential it can be?
A bit of a pessimist when it comes to the prospect of rolling back or reining in, I should say, the civil rights state.
We're not trying to do that, but we want to just protect kids.
Any Republican will probably tell you that if you touch this
one or
issue
the
with a
other.
10-foot pole, for example, you say we want to scale back on the funding of the Office for Civil Rights.
We are endorsing this
That's maybe today things are a little bit different, but that's pretty much the end of your
pharmacy
career.
and
look, here's what I would say.
plastic surgery
when it comes to
on
the
children.
medical side of things,
It's
I think first
disgusting.
of all we need to be absolutely clear, and policymakers need to make clear. This is not a civil rights question with medical implications. This is a medical question with civil rights implications. They're thinking about it exactly backwards. And you see evidence of this in, again, court rulings, OCR determinations, HHS determinations. They lead with civil rights reasoning. They'll say things like transgender people have always been oppressed, they're at the margins, this, that, and the other. Therefore, any attempt to constrain or restrict their access to
the way I grew up,
interventions is a violation
they
of
were
civil
always
rights.
part of.
Well, that's only true if
part
these
of
medical
culture.
interventions are
Nobody
actually
was
good and
oppressing them.
evidence-based, and that they actually constitute medical care as
But
opposed
when
to
you come after
harm.
the children,
So the
when
thinking
you
about this is
march
exactly reverse, and that's I
and
think one of
sound,
the lingering pathologies
coming after
of the
the
American
children,
civil rights state.
that is wrong.
We turn questions of policy first and foremost into questions of civil rights, and everything has to be refracted through that lens. You can see this, for example, in debates about how to restore order to the great American cities. Rather than ask the question, what is a good method for restoring order, reducing crime, bringing business back, especially to inner city areas of commerce and so on and so forth. Anybody who's trying to answer those questions first has to answer the question, why is this not a violation of civil rights if we're going to have police officers enforcing rules that have a disparate impact on African Americans, for example? That's a very distorted way to think about public policy, but that is where we are. And it seems to me very difficult to roll that kind of thinking back. Although, we at the Manhattan Institute, I think, have really been trying hard and making some good progress in that respect. So I think at minimum, as a first step, and a very modest step, we need judges because, again, the courts here are key. We need judges to think about this issue not from a lens of civil rights and law, but from a lens of medical practice and deference to true expertise. That's the first thing I'd say. The second is
we are so
the civil
latched
rights
onto
state has to come back to its respect
the
for
social
process,
virtue.
procedure. And that means, especially in the case of setting policy on sensitive cultural issues,
basic
respect
laws
for disagreement,
and
debate,
also
vigorous
basic
engagement,
biology. And
not shutting out one
who
side
I
of the
offend
issue because they've
saying
already been determined to be anti-civil rights and hateful bigots. And certainly when it comes to the question of transgender medicine, that has been the case. There's very, very little inclination. For example,
puberty
in the
blockers
Biden
are child
Department
abuse.
of Health and Human Services,
You
to
can
listen to
send me
contrary
all the hate
perspectives.
mail
And
you want.
the evidence of
I
that
don't
is what
care.
we see from
This
Admiral
is
Rachel
child
Levin,
abuse.
who is touting talking
If
points
you
that
cannot
the Europeans are
pick up
frankly
a
rolling
gun,
their eyes at and asking how is it
taxes,
possible that such a senior member of the Biden
drive,
administration is
buy
saying that puberty
alcohol,
blockers
buy
are completely
cigarettes,
reversible, that the evidence base is
buy a hooker.
settled science on this issue.
If
when
you are a
everybody in their
minor,
right mind knows
I'm
that's not the
sorry,
case.
you do
And I
not.
think part of the reason for that is that we don't have a good culture
We
of
like
respect
some
for
kids
open
are
disagreement,
advanced, some kids
civil
are
debate,
behind. We have these
even and especially
laws
on
in
controversial
place
topics.
to
Leora,
protect
thank you very
kids,
much for your time. We really appreciate
and we
it.
have lost that.
Thanks so much.
We are grooming kids,
Listeners,
and
don't
it
forget
is
to check out his work for the
disturbing.
Manhattan Institute.
And it's
We'll
being
link to a scholar page in the
celebrated.
podcast
It's
description.
being celebrated.
If you like what you heard on the podcast, please feel free to write a review wherever you listen.
It's wrong.
And be sure to tune in to future episodes of
If you want to
Manhattan
trans,
Insights.
when
I'm your
you're an
host,
adult,
Raihan Salam.
when you can pick up a gun for your country, hey, you can pick up a gun for your country. Absolutely. You can do whatever. Until then, we need to watch out for kids. And I know a lot of trans people I have talked to say, oh, we wish we could have just avoided this. Well, it's become a trend. And here's the problem. Maybe go back like 5, 10, 15 years ago, no problem. Kid wants to try it. Dumb idea, but no problem. Yeah, if no kid, it was so different long ago, and now it's almost like we're giving minors more rights over adults. Like, it's almost like some of these kids have more rights over their bodies than what I do as a tax-paying adult. And that's why I do speak up. Like, I think this is wrong. And I think a lot of this is going to go back really bad. Because kids do not actually understand a lot of the consequences of their actions. Even most adults don't even. And so we're giving children, I will say that. Sorry, if you are a minor, you are still a child. And hey, when I was 15, I had a job, a straight A student, and I think I even did start paying taxes. But I still didn't have the legal rights to get breast implants. But if I was a boy nowadays, I could get all the breast implants I want. But as a woman, female, who's a gearhead, who loves like mechanics and building, and I would be told, oh, no, you will not. If you're depressed, you'll never get over it unless you hack off your breasts and, get a whole hysterectomy before you're even fully developed. I think we're going backwards. Thank you for joining me. I do have longer clips, but I'm just going to shut it down. It's at the 2-minute mark. One more. Let's see what else is up. I can never help but one more. Yeah, I'm sorry. I might do an open panel tomorrow. Sometimes I just feel there. Yeah. Why don't we show this one? close it out on a happy note, if you can call
Aloha,
it that.
everyone. Michelle Melendez with Blossom Inner Wellness and StandTogetherHawaii.com. And I first just want to say thank you to everybody who has gone to that site, StandTogetherHawaii.com, who has contacted our state representatives, our state senators, who has asked the Attorney General to look into these fires in Maui. Thank you so much. There's 4 actions that we're taking, and that's contact these state representatives, tell them that the governor needs to put back in place the First Amendment. The First Amendment is being violated.
It is,
Lahaina,
absolutely.
and also to have the
this is
boot
why
them
I'm
out.
posting
Boot
this.
the governor,
First
boot Maui
Amendment,
mayor,
they
and
are
boot
getting
the police chief,
silenced
because
in
what they're doing
Hawaii,
is
and this
absolutely
is
against the people.
disgusting.
So I just want to say thank you for
cannot
that.
treat
If you have commented
taxpayers,
on our
citizens
site,
like this,
on the
and
emails,
it's a huge,
I'm sorry, on the
disgusting
YouTube channel,
land grab.
there's over 4,000 comments. I can't get to everybody, so that's why I'm doing more videos to just try to answer questions this way as best as I can. So much mahalo for helping spread the word. Today I'm really, really excited because I'm talking to 30-year fire captain Matt Denkin, and he is he's got so much information to share. I want to tell you, we're going to do this video in 2 parts. The first part is going to be on YouTube. We're going to share some stuff, but then I am moving this interview to Rumble because he's going to be sharing some information about what you can do to keep yourself safe, to literally get out of the system that has, there's a lot of stuff we're going to be sharing. So I don't want to share too much here on YouTube, but please check out the Rumble. The rest of this video will be at Rumble, where we are not censored and we can speak freely. So Matt, Captain Matt, I'm just so excited. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
So first, let's talk about your experience. You've been a fire captain for 30 years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I started, well, I had total, using the term 33, but